Not in the way conspiracy theorists talk about. Not secretly. Not through fraud. It happened in the open. Announced on a Sunday night, on television, and most people watched it and went back to bed. What changed that night wasn't just a policy, it was the rules of the entire global financial system. And the country that made that change gave itself a power that no nation in history had ever held before. The power to create money, unlimited, backed by nothing. And the rest of the world had no choice but to accept it. For most of human history, money had one rule. It had to be worth something. You couldn't just print it. You couldn't just declare it valuable. It had to be tied to something real, something scarce, something you couldn't fake. For centuries, that something was gold. Gold worked as money for a simple reason. You can't manufacture it. You can't conjure it from thin air. Every ounce had to be pulled from the earth. So when a government issued paper currency, that paper was just a receipt, a promise, a claim on real gold sitting in a real vault. If the government printed more paper than it had gold to back, the whole thing unraveled. Countries had tried. Every single one had been punished for it. By the late 1800s, the major economies of the world had formalized this into something called the gold standard. The rules were simple. Your currency was fixed to gold at a specific rate. Anyone holding your paper had the right to exchange it for metal. The government's hands were tied. It was a system designed around one idea: discipline. Governments couldn't spend more than they had. They couldn't inflate their way out of debt. They couldn't quietly devalue their currency to gain an advantage over rivals. The gold standard was a cage. But here's what most people didn't realize. Some countries were starting to find a way around it. July 1944. The Second World War isn't over yet. But the most powerful economic minds in the world have gathered in a hotel in New Hampshire. Not to fight the war, to design what comes after it. Europe was destroyed. Factories, bridges, entire cities. Britain, which had run the global financial system for over a century, had spent everything it had to survive. And America had never been bombed. Its factories hadn't just survived the war, they'd been supercharged by it. By 1944, the United States held nearly 60% of all the monetary gold on Earth. 60% in one country. So, when the world sat down to design a new financial system, there was really only one option. John Maynard Keynes, the most respected economist alive, represented Britain. He had a proposal: create a new international currency, neutral, belonging to no single nation. He called it the Bancor. The idea was elegant. No country would have an unfair advantage. No single government could manipulate the system for its own benefit. It was genuinely the fairer option. Harry Dexter White, representing America, rejected it entirely. Why invent something new when the dollar already existed? Keynes argued. He warned that putting one nation's currency at the center of the world was a dangerous idea. What happens, he asked, when that country's own interests conflict with what the world needs? He was right, and he lost, because Britain was broke, and broke countries don't win arguments with the people funding their recovery. The system that emerged from that hotel was called Bretton Woods. Every major currency on Earth was fixed to the dollar. The dollar was fixed to gold, $35 per ounce, guaranteed, redeemable, on demand. Hold a dollar. You held gold. For about 20 years, it worked. Almost. The post-war years were, for America, something close to a golden age. And the Bretton Woods system was a large part of why. Here's what most people never understood about how it actually worked. America spent dollars abroad, on military bases, foreign aid, imports, global trade, and those dollars didn't come home. Because every central bank in the world wanted to hold them. Dollars were as good as gold, and far easier to move. So they held them. Europe rebuilt with American dollars running through its veins. Japan industrialized. South Korea modernized. The whole post-war recovery was, in a very real sense, dollar-powered. And in return, America received something that had no historical precedent. In 1965, the French finance minister gave it a name. He called it America's exorbitant privilege. Every other country had to earn its money. Through exports, through production, through labor. America could print dollars, and the world would accept them. That privilege funded everything: the space race, the interstate highway system, the largest military buildup in peacetime history, social programs on a scale no government had ever attempted before. All of it financed, in part, by the rest of the world's willingness to hold American paper. But there was a number quietly building in the background. A number no one in Washington wanted to look at directly. The gold was leaving, because the deal was still the deal. Hold dollars, exchange for gold, anytime you want. And countries were starting to do exactly that. Charles de Gaulle was not a man who trusted American promises. In 1965, he did something that made the entire financial world uncomfortable. He sent a French warship to New York Harbor, loaded with dollars, and demanded gold in exchange. He wasn't breaking any rules. That was literally the agreement signed in 1944, but he was testing it. And every other country watched and quietly started doing the same. By 1971, the United States had less than $10 billion worth of gold left in its reserves. But it had printed over $50 billion now circulating around the world. The math no longer worked. The entire planet was holding a promise that America could no longer keep. Inside the White House, a small group of advisors had started meeting in secret. They called it the problem. They had been stalling for months, but by August 1971, the stalling was over. Britain had just formally requested to convert over $3 billion into gold. And that was the moment the decision was made. On the evening of Friday, August 13th, 1971, Richard Nixon secretly convened 15 advisors at Camp David. No one outside that room knew what was being discussed. Not Congress, not America's allies, not the central banks of Europe and Asia who would wake up on Monday morning to a completely different world. On Sunday evening, August 15th, Nixon went on television. He announced that the United States was suspending the dollar's convertibility to gold, effective immediately. No more exchanges, no more $35 per ounce. The dollar was now backed by nothing, except the word of the United States government. The reaction from America's allies was immediate. The German finance minister called it a catastrophe. The French called it America, declaring financial war on the world. The system built in that New Hampshire hotel, the system that had governed global finance for 27 years, was gone, overnight, without negotiation, without consent, and here's what no one predicted. The dollar didn't collapse. It got stronger, because in the months that followed, America made a deal that didn't just save the dollar. It made the dollar more powerful than gold had ever been. In 1974, Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia. He sat down with King Faisal, and he made an offer. America would provide Saudi Arabia with military protection, advanced weapons, security guarantees. In exchange, Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars and use its influence to convince the rest of OPEC to do the same. Oil is the foundation of the modern economy. Every factory, every vehicle, every cargo ship, every power station keeping the lights on in every city on Earth, all of it ran on oil, and now all of it required dollars to purchase. Suddenly, every country on Earth needed dollar reserves, not because of any treaty, not because of any law, simply because without dollars, you couldn't keep your economy running. The gold standard was gone, but the oil standard had replaced it. And oil was something you could never run out of needing. That's when the trap really closed. Here's the part of this story that most people have never heard. A decade before Nixon's announcement, a Belgian-American economist named Robert Triffin sat before the United States Congress and told them exactly what was going to happen. His argument was devastatingly simple. If the dollar is the world's reserve currency, the world needs dollars to trade, to save, to function at all. And the only way to supply the world with enough dollars is for America to spend more than it earns, to run deficits permanently. But here's the paradox. If America runs those deficits forever, the debt grows, and eventually the world starts losing faith in the dollar. But if America stops running deficits, the world runs out of dollars. Global trade ceases, credit freezes, economies collapse. Either path leads somewhere bad. That is the trap. Economists call it Triffin's dilemma. Congress listened to Robert Triffin. They thanked him, and they did nothing. Because there was nothing to do, the system was already built, and changing course would have been more destructive than staying on it. September 2008. Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy. Within days, credit markets across the entire globe froze. Not just in America, in Iceland, in Ireland, in South Korea, in Brazil, in Australia. Countries that had done nothing wrong. Banks that had never touched a single American mortgage. All of it connected. All of it falling together. The Federal Reserve responded by pumping trillions of dollars into the global financial system, not just to save American banks, to save the entire global economy from seizing up completely. And it worked. But look at what the solution required. The cure for a crisis caused by too much dollar-denominated debt was more dollar-denominated debt. Then it happened again. 12 years later, COVID-19 shut down the global economy in weeks. The Federal Reserve injected more money into the global system in 6 months than it had in its entire previous 100-year history. 6 months, 1 century of money creation, doubled. And now you understand why prices went up everywhere, not just in America, everywhere. Because when you print more dollars, everything priced in dollars costs more, including things in countries that had no say in the decision whatsoever. Today, the United States national debt exceeds $35 trillion, and it grows by roughly $3 billion every single day. Not primarily because American politicians are reckless, but because the global system structurally requires it. Robert Triffin predicted this 60 years ago. He was right about everything. When 12 people in a room in Washington raise interest rates, your mortgage payment goes up. Your country's currency shifts in value. Trade slows. Commodities become harder to purchase. Even if you've never set foot in America, even if your government made none of the decisions that led there, that is what the system looks like from the outside. Rules written by one country, applied to every country, with no vote, no appeal, no exit. And here's the part that makes this story genuinely unsettling. America didn't build this system through conquest. It didn't force the world into it at gunpoint. The world chose it. Because in 1944, it was the only option that worked. And now, no one can leave, not even America. For most of human history, money meant something real. You could hold it, weigh it. You knew what it was. Then, one Sunday night in 1971, that changed. And the new system that replaced it was built on something far more fragile than gold. It was built on the world's willingness to believe. To believe that the dollar means something. To believe that the country issuing it is stable enough, powerful enough, trustworthy enough to keep the whole thing running. And for now, that belief holds. Countries that have tried to challenge it have discovered quickly how costly that challenge becomes. The system survives not because it's fair, not because it's logical, but because the alternative, the chaos of replacing it, is worse than living inside it. But belief is a fragile thing, and somewhere in the world right now, that belief is being tested, quietly, the way all the biggest changes happen. Because if money isn't backed by anything anymore, then what is it really worth?